All right, we are live right now on Facebook, and we are welcomed by State Auditor of Missouri, Nicole Galloway, on this Friday night, of course, running as the Democratic challenger to Governor Parson in the governor's race. Nicole, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So these formats that we've been doing with a lot of different candidates in different races, this is how it works. For the next 30 minutes, we'll ask Nicole questions. And a lot of those questions need to come from you, the viewer here on Facebook, because that's what this whole purpose of this is. So if you do have a question for Nicole, just add it to the comment section below, and we'll be sure to pass that along to Ms. Galloway. So first of all, Nicole, I want to ask you, why do you think you're the right person to lead Missouri as governor?
Again, thanks for having me on. I am running for governor to put Jefferson City back on the side of Missouri families. I have seen in Jefferson City for far too long that well-connected insiders get what they want while Missouri families struggle. As state auditor, I've looked under the hood of state government. I found over $370 million in government waste and abuse. And because of those audits, I've worked hand in hand with law enforcement and I've helped bring 63 criminal counts against corrupt public officials in this state. People are concerned about the cost of healthcare. They're concerned about the economic impacts of COVID. They're concerned about funding for schools. And if our current governor, Mike Parson, had a plan for these most pressing issues, we would have seen it already. He's been in charge for years, and folks are ready for a new direction because they know the status quo is just not working.
You just mentioned what we are all dealing with, the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. We are 7 months into this pandemic, and we still don't have a large-scale rapid testing program in place that would help get kids back into school, people back to work. Who's to blame for that?
This has just been a complete failure from out of Jefferson City, and Governor Parson's failures on COVID have never been more clear. You mentioned rapid testing. We also don't have a contact tracing program. We have almost $1 billion in CARES Act money that is just stuck at the state level and not being deployed to help folks right now who need assistance, who need PPE. It's just, it's so troubling. And, these past few weeks alone have shown the depth of the governor's incompetence and mismanagement of this crisis, the extent to which his administration has failed to be honest with the people of Missouri, because hospitalizations are surging in all parts of our state. In Kansas City, they are turning away ambulances because their hospitals are so overrun with COVID patients. The governor's administration can't even accurately report the data about the most serious public health emergency our state has ever seen. And so we need just a complete reset on our coronavirus strategy so we can get this under control. We can get our lives back and we can get our schools open again.
Is there one thing specifically that Governor Parson hasn't done that you point at and you say, as governor, I would have done this?
There's many things. First, I would listen to science and data. My plan for COVID is based on containment, on mitigation, on, as you said, rapid testing, an actual contact tracing program, and masks. I do believe in a statewide mask rule because this is a low barrier way to contain the spread of the virus. Masks should not be political. It's unfortunate that they have become that way. If you look in Arizona, where there's a Republican governor there, when he put in a mask rule for the state of Arizona, new cases dropped by 75%. 75%. Our positivity rate right now is near 20%, 20%. We will never get our economy back, get people back to work, have folks comfortable engaging in the economy until we contain the spread of the virus. It is the most pressing issue that the next governor will have to face.
Nicole, we're starting to get some questions from our Facebook viewers tonight. I don't know who asked this one, but says that you said at the top of this that you're tired of seeing Jefferson City get what they want, but not all Missourians. Do we have a representation problem in this state? Is it equal?
I think the priorities in Jefferson City have just been wrong. Governor Parson rose through the ranks of the establishment with the help of some very powerful friends that are now spending millions to hold on to power so they can get what they want while Missourians struggle, as I said. And those powerful interests, for instance, want to make Missouri a right to work state. And Governor Parson is fine with that. He said he would sign a right to work bill. I would veto it. Voters in 2018 said they do not want Missouri to be a right to work state. We said that overwhelmingly, yet the insiders in Jefferson City are not listening. That's why I say when I want to return government back to the needs of working families, back to the needs of working people, I really do mean it. I mean, I talk to so many folks that, working people that have no access to health care at all. They have no health insurance, and they have to drive 50 miles, 100 miles to seek access to critical care. If you're a working mom and you get sick, how can you survive that? You're basically one medical emergency away from bankruptcy. Yet these pleas and these needs of our families are falling on deaf ears in Jefferson City.
Of course, it's the political season. We're seeing all the attack ads back and forth and ads that we've fact-checked that have been against you. We haven't fact-checked this one yet, but there is one currently running that's from a PAC sponsoring Governor Parson, has an ad saying that you only work 10 hours a week. Again, we haven't independently, fact-checked that. What's your response to that ad that's running?
Being state auditor means taking a deep dive into the financial statements and the financial management of state and local governments. It's detailed work. I'm a CPA, I'm a certified fraud examiner, and so I have that experience. Being state auditor is not flying around on the state plane giving press conferences and giving thumbs up at press availabilities. It is often detailed work that is done quietly until we have the results of the audit. And so I'm sure that if you fact check that, you would also find that claim to be false, as all the others that have been in those attack ads.
We're getting a lot of comments from our Facebook viewers tonight talking about the polarizing times that we're living in, and comments saying that they're not voting for Democrats because of that. What do you say to those people who say we're not going to vote for Democrats because it's a polarizing time?
I think that our politics has gotten very divisive, and I think that's incredibly unfortunate. And what I always see in Jefferson City is that, those that are in power are hoping that we point the finger at each other, that we spend all of our time blaming each other for our problems, because if we're too busy doing that, then we won't have time to point the finger of blame at them, those that are actually in power, and holding them accountable for the decisions that they are making on our behalf. When I travel the state, north, south, east, west, urban, rural, I hear common themes everywhere I go. Folks want a good job close to home. They want healthcare. They want a good education for their kids. They want to live in a safe community. There's so much more that brings us together than divides us. And I think those divisive political ploys are purposeful to distract from the failures that occur for those who are in charge.
Let's talk some about policing in our state, because it seems like Governor Parson, that's where he's really trying to separate himself and you as a candidate, as the law and order person for the state, especially with his sheriff background. Of course, he's asked you or said many times that you support defunding the police. You say that is simply not true. So just right here, talk about what you plan to do for police in Missouri in order to support them.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's again be clear, and I will say it again directly. I do not support defunding the police. I've been clear from that from the beginning. I know Governor Parson wants to say that over and over again because he hopes that it becomes true, but it is not. And the truth is, the only candidate in this race for governor that has defunded the police is Governor Parson, because he cut $1.8 million from our state's police force earlier this year. And our budgets are about priorities. As a mom, I have 3 kids. The safety of our communities is paramount to me. And so, of course, we need to support our law enforcement, make sure that they have the tools and the resources they need to keep us safe. And I've worked hand in hand with law enforcement um, as state auditor, as I said, to bring 63 criminal counts against public officials in the state of both parties, Democrats and Republicans. The truth also is that crime has gotten violent crime in particular has gotten worse under Governor Parson's watch. He has been in charge for years, and last year, as gun violence was increasing in all parts of our state, folks were asking him to call a special session to deal with the issues of crime and public safety, and he said no. He said he had to stay in his lane and instead called a special session for used boat and car trade-ins, tax breaks for used boat and car trade-ins. This year he did call a special session. Again, another year of record-breaking crime under his watch. And, the legislature rejected the majority of his proposals, like throwing 12-year-olds in adult prisons. So, we need to, as I said, support our law enforcement officers so they can responsibly and do their job. But we also need policies that get to the root causes of crime in the first place.
Since you're saying there was that delay for a year of calling that special session, as you said, Governor Parson did call the special session. Do you think he got to the crux of the issues that are going to have a big impact on curbing crime and violence in St. Louis, Kansas City, and elsewhere in Missouri?
I mean, we're identifying that crime is a statewide issue. It is, I am from St. Louis. I grew up in St. Louis. I grew up in Fenton. I know that there's an alarming rate of crime that's happening in St. Louis, but it's also occurring in Kansas City and in Springfield and Columbia. The only measure that was passed to deal with crime statewide was a witness protection fund, and that had bipartisan support. That likely would have passed in the regular session, except the session got disrupted by COVID. But here's the thing, is that Governor Parson forgot to include funding for the Witness Protection Fund in his call for special session. So the legislature spent 2 months, $200,000 in the governor's call, and didn't even appropriate money for the one statewide tool that we have. And so essentially you can't use it right now. There's no money for it. He's going to have to call another special session to get that done, or it's going to wait until next year. This is urgent. This is urgent and is happening now. And he wasn't even thoughtful enough to include funding for the one tool that the legislature passed.
One follow-up question to that. This is from John, one of our Facebook viewers. He says, how would you address the root causes of the murder epidemic in St. Louis and Kansas City and elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, we've seen rises in crime that's been happening for years. And the legislature in 2016 passed a bill called Senate Bill 656. And Parson voted for it. It allows criminals to have easier access to guns. And we have seen a proliferation of illegal guns on our streets. And law enforcement, even the Sheriff's Association, was begging the legislature, please don't pass this bill because we're going to see an uptick in violent crime. Well, the legislature passed it anyway, and so now we've seen an increase in violent crime. I support 90% of Missourians. I stand with the 90% of Missourians that want to see common sense gun safety rules like background checks. We are not going to deal with violent crime until we deal with the issue of illegal guns. And, I have found the story in Kansas City. I was told the story in Kansas City. It applies to St. Louis too. I heard a story from a mom who found out her 15-year-old son was planning to buy a gun from a 17-year-old boy. And this mom said, why? Why are you doing this? Why are you purchasing this gun? And the 15-year-old boy looked at his mom and said, what difference does it make? I'm not going to live to be 21 anyway. For that 15-year-old boy and for that mom, what he thinks is his destiny, his only future in life, is to be dead by gun violence at 21. He has no hope, no opportunity. So in addition to dealing with his access to an illegal gun, we also need to address the disinvestment that's occurred in our education system, the lack of investment in healthcare, the lack of job opportunities, the lack of economic hope and empowerment that so many folks have that are really rooted in, or where violent crime is rooted in.
Let's talk a little bit more about policing. Should police departments be required to equip officers with body cameras and dash cameras in the cruisers?
I do think that we need body cameras, and we also need rules around when body cameras are turned on and when they're turned off. They should be on during an interaction that a law enforcement officer would have with the public, and there should be rules around that. Yes.
Going back to some of the attack ads claiming that you're bankrolled by the same extremists who want to defund our police, which again, we've fact-checked, and that bankrolled statement is simply not true. However, there is at least one group called Indivisible that is encouraging people to donate to your campaign. That group has supported efforts to defund the police. What do you think about that group and other groups like it that have that message of defunding the police that support your campaign?
And as I said, these, again, they can say it as many times as they want to say it, but it's just not accurate. As I just explained, I do not support defunding the police. I am clear with that with everyone. There's individual Missourians across this state that are supporting my campaign. Folks that want to see change, that want to see something better. They want to see somebody that will fight for them. So again, they can put these things in attack ads, and some of those attack ads are so false that TV stations actually pulled them off the air. So they will continue to lie about my record because they do not want to defend their own.
But do you want groups that have this message or believe this defunding the police, do you want their support?
I mean, look, I'm supported by folks all across Missouri, and I don't know all of their individual beliefs, but as I said, I don't support defunding the police. If they're supporting my campaign, then they would go in knowing that I do not support defunding the police.
Going back again to another policing question, should there be a national database for police officers who have been fired and then possibly rehired at a police department in Missouri?
If it's a national database, that is not something that I think as governor or a law out of Jefferson City would be able to address. That seems like that would be a federal issue. If there was a federal database, I would assume that Missouri would participate in something like that. I do think that there should be oversight and accountability in our criminal justice system. If there's not appropriate accountability, if there's not appropriate oversight, then it will sow and create distrust between law enforcement and the communities that they are sworn to protect and serve. And so I have proposed reform policies that are designed, as I said, to build that trust. And part of that would be at a statewide level, again, not a national level. That's not something that I would be able to have say over. But at a statewide level, having a civilian oversight board that does have the authority to do independent investigations of police incidents, to take it out of the political system and make sure that there is, as I said, the appropriate oversight so we can build trust between law enforcement and our communities.
Another question from one of our viewers, Nicole. This is from Chad. Asks, what is your proposal to bring more businesses and jobs to our state?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many answers to that, but let me tell you, containing the spread of the virus to get our economy back on track is number one, because we know that our state and our local budgets are in peril right now because of the economic impacts of COVID-19. And so that hurts our ability to invest in our workforce. $250 million was cut from K through 12 education. $100 million was cut from higher education by Governor Parson. And reversing those cuts means we have to contain the spread of the virus so our budget is in a better position. We are competing with talent. With Chicago and Denver and Austin and Nashville, right? We are competing with others. And if we want capital, if we want investment, if we want to attract businesses, we have to have a skilled and trained workforce. I also think that we need to stop the divisive social debates and policies that have been pushed forward out of Jefferson City because unfortunately, Missouri has developed a bad reputation taken nationally. And so if you don't know anything about St. Louis, if you don't know anything about Missouri, if you Google our state, that may not be what we want people to see because we push forward these divisive social debates. I mean, you can still be fired for being gay here in our state. It is time that we change that. We are not going to be able to compete with all these other states and cities for investment unless we start showing how fantastic Missouri is and investing in our workforce.
What about, let's talk a little about some of the racial divides that our communities, still have, especially, in the St. Louis area. Last night we had a story about the Delmar divide, and that's been, something that's always been talked about. So how do we bridge the gaps better from, that can start happening in Jefferson City to bridge this racial divide that our communities experience on a daily basis?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, it's recognizing that those divides do exist and that there are systemic inequalities in our institutions. And the Delaware divide is an institutional divide, essentially, right? And there's been disinvestment in education, disinvestment in neighborhoods, disinvestments in healthcare. And so, first and foremost, it's recognizing that those things are real and they do exist, because otherwise you'll never be able to have a plan to address it. I have released an opportunity agenda for Black Missourians that deal with and works to address the inequalities that you are mentioning. After the killing of George Floyd, I think there have been rightful calls for change, rightful calls for more progress. And we really saw some amazing acts of unity this summer with members of the community and law enforcement standing together saying, we want change. And I think people are tired of just talk. They want action. So I have put together this agenda and I'm currently working with legislators to turn it into a legislative reality so we can address some of the divisions that exist institutionally in our state.
You brought up George Floyd, and after that had happened over the summer, obviously we saw protests and some acts of violence that happened across the country. We do have a comment asking, do you stand against the burning and looting that sometimes we see in the aftermath of these events that happen across our country?
Absolutely. I mean, violence cannot be tolerated. Looting cannot be tolerated. Violence against others cannot be tolerated. And it's unfortunate that happened under Governor Parson's watch with protests in St. Louis, and we saw some instances of that. But, as governor, there would be no tolerance for that type of violence against life and others, and no tolerance for that type of violence against property.
You have mentioned in this chat so far some of the shortcomings our healthcare system is going under. And when you look at a federal level of talking about the Affordable Care Act and trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, obviously that's been a push by the president and Republicans of trying to get that done. Is that a bad thing for Missourians, for our country? A lot of things would be impacted by that, by possibly getting rid of the Affordable Care Act. Give us your thoughts on that.
If the Affordable Care Act was overturned, it would be devastating for Missourians, because let's remember what that would mean. If the Affordable Care Act is overturned, over 2 million Missourians would lose their insurance coverage for pre-existing conditions. Kids and young adults that are 26 and younger would be able to no longer be able to stay on their parents' health care, right? And voters just said that we wanted Medicaid expansion in August of this year, when the majority of Missourians said that, hey, I want affordable, accessible health care. Medicaid expansion would be in jeopardy if the Affordable Care Act was overturned. And I know that we can implement Medicaid expansion in a way that doesn't raise taxes, that doesn't gut other accounts, that creates thousands and thousands of good jobs, that keeps our rural hospitals open. We can open clinics in parts of our state that really need it. And, when I travel the state, as I said before, healthcare is really the biggest issue. And that's why I put out a healthcare plan to address Medicaid expansion, to address the high cost of premiums and deductibles, the high cost of prescription drugs, but also to make sure that we do have coverage for those with pre-existing conditions. We're in the midst of a pandemic. Working people need healthcare. People need access to healthcare and health insurance. Our current governor just has no plan or vision to address the significant issue. If he had a plan, we would have seen it already.
We are getting some comments with a comment that you had made moments ago talking about not having protections for those who are being gay. I think the comment that we're getting is there's no state protection, and people on our comment section are saying that that's not true in the state of Missouri. I haven't fact checked that here at my desk. I don't have my laptop here, but tell me, what is the statute of that would fire someone for being gay in Missouri? I think you had mentioned something.
So maybe folks don't know. So in the state of Missouri, we have not passed the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act statewide, and we're one of the last states to do it. Has been proposed in the legislature, I believe, for the last decade, and it has not been passed. And so because it has not been passed in the state of Missouri, there's no state law for protections for those that are gay in housing, employment, and transportation. Certainly, like I live in the city of Columbia right now, and there's some local protections that the city of Columbia have put in place. This is a place where the private sector has stepped in. And so in many places in the private sector, they have updated their own personnel policies to make that the case. But there is no state law protecting those in the LGBTQ community.
Are there other things that the state of Missouri does not cover that other states do?
For instance, we don't have a prescription drug monitoring program. We know that opioid use and the abuse of opioids is a significant issue in our state. And unfortunately, Missouri is the only state in the country that does not have a prescription drug monitoring program.
Going back to a social issue question, obviously Roe v. Wade is the law of the land on abortion. Would you like to see that overturned or expanded? What are your specific views when it comes to abortion?
I trust women to make their own healthcare decision in consultation with their faith, their family, their physician. I do support Roe v. Wade and do not want to see that overturned. But let's remember where we are here in Missouri, because the governor championed and signed HB 126 that takes away a woman's right to choose, even in the cases of rape and incest. It is extreme and it is cruel. And I have met with and spoken to survivors of rape. They should be able to have the power to decide what comes next. But that has been taken away from them in Missouri. And remember, Missourians rejected the rhetoric of Todd Akin in 2012 when he made those comments about a woman's body being able to shut down legitimate rape. But that's not just rhetoric anymore. That is now the law here in Missouri. And so again, I think that women should be trusted to make their own healthcare decisions.
About 2 minutes left in our conversation tonight. Again, if you have a question, you're watching on Facebook, please chime in on the comment section. We'll try to get that in the last couple minutes here. I want to go back to COVID-19, since obviously that is the big talker right now. You had mentioned about some of the data that's being reported from the state, and it's been inconsistent. There's been delays. There's been data that hasn't come in correctly. That's a kind of a pointing fingers game. So how would you as governor make sure that everyone has that correct data so we can all make decisions based on data?
Yeah, this is just one of the biggest failures of the Parson administration. remember that we lost our hospitalization data for a period of time where we weren't reporting any hospitalizations. Now we've gotten an alert that, and it's up on the government website here in Missouri, that the hospitalizations are being undercounted and they're not accurate. We are now on, I think, our third or fourth dashboard here in the state of Missouri for COVID reporting data. It just must be incompetence at this point. Public health experts, the public, school districts, local communities, hospitals cannot make good decisions unless they have data in the midst of this crisis. It's how we know what the positivity rate is in a community. It's how we know that hospitalizations are going up in all parts of our community, particularly in the rural parts. And now those patients are coming into our metro areas and urban areas at an alarming rate. It's how we can monitor if mitigation steps are working or not. We need data for that. And so my feeling is we do not need another website, another dashboard. We just need a new governor and a new administration.
This question from Stephanie, this might be our last one, but on the COVID, how would you expand COVID testing throughout the state?
I would expand it through rapid testing. So we need rapid testing, and where you can get a test and get those test results back quickly. I hear stories all the time from folks. They get a test on a Monday, for instance. They don't get the results till Friday. They have then missed a whole week's worth of work, lost their income, and their employer lost an employee. We cannot stand that way. And in Missouri, if we cannot get those rapid tests on our own, we should combine our purchasing power with other states in our region so we can then purchase those rapid tests. We have seen other states come together to form those types of intergovernmental agreements so they can have the purchasing power to get this done. There's no reason Missouri cannot be or shouldn't be a leader so we can get the testing that we need here in our state.
All right, I lied. We have another question. This is from Chad. This is, he says, how are you going to be able to help rural communities with internet access, career education, programs for low-income families in the state? So answer that.
Sure. That's a lot in a short period of time. Look, I think if this pandemic has taught us anything, it's that our communities need to be connected. This is a rural and an urban issue. And I don't see broadband as a partisan issue at all. There is bipartisan support and movement in Jefferson City to expand access to broadband in our rural areas, particularly. And there's some public-private partnerships that are being developed right now and have been over the past several years to get broadband to our communities. So I think that there's opportunities to get grant money from the federal government in order to invest in broadband. But as I said, this is not a partisan issue. And there's lots of innovation that is happening right now under COVID. We should not put that innovation back in a box once this pandemic is over. This should be a jumping off point. And that's how we should view broadband.
Nicole Galloway, thank you so much for your time on this Friday night. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you.